I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I'm just going to interrupt Brandon. I just clicked record on my YouTube account. I'm interviewing Brandon from California on the virtue of name calling. I'm going to put Brandon on speakerphone, and Brandon and I are going to talk about an article by John Robbins called The Virtue of Name Calling. And I'm going to put it on speakerphone now. And I interrupted him. He was talking about Mark Carpenter and outside the camp, one of his articles. I'm going to put Brandon back on the air. And Brandon's going to tell me about Mark Carpenter and Outside the Camp article on this issue.
Yeah, Andrew. What I was saying to you about the article by Robbins, Virtuous Name Calling, is that I know Carpenter was influenced by that article. I think that article was written in 1979. Is that correct?
I think you're right. It's quite an old article, the 70s or 80s. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I know that Carpenter had written some essays for the Trinity Foundation some years back, and he has one piece on the Outside the Camp website called answering those who accuse us of not manifesting the fruits of the Spirit. I think that's the title of it. It's not in the main article section, but it's in the subsection at the main menu. And then there's another piece called, I think it's called Unsurly, Duly Harsh, or something like that, with a question mark at the end. And it's basically what Carpenter did there in both of those pieces. He showed that pretty much every biblical writer and Christ himself, like especially in chapters like Matthew 23, there's a misconception out there by most false Christians, and they just think that Christians should never name call or should never be harsh with the enemies of God, with unbelievers. And I remember in Galatians 5:11, Paul actually said that the cross of Christ is an offense. So I think that if we're not offending false Christians or unbelievers, then I don't even think you can lead God's unregenerate elect people to Him without offending them directly. Sometimes I think that's one of the means by which God has prescribed to true believers to communicate unbelievers. What do you think?
Amen. I've pulled up John Robbins' article, and I have some of the verses here. In Matthew 23, John Robbins cites that Jesus calls the scribes and Pharisees names 16 times in one chapter. Jesus calls the Pharisees and scribes hypocrites 7 times. He calls them sons of hell once. Jesus calls the scribes and Pharisees blind guides twice, fools and blind 3 times, white, and how do you pronounce this? It's sepulchre once, the serpents once, and offsprings of vipers once. And Robbins also cites the Apostle John called certain people antichrists. The Bible calls some people fools, and Paul in 1 Timothy chapter 4 verse 2 refers to some people as hypocritical liars. In 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 13, the Apostle Paul calls some people gossips and busybodies. He also, Robbins also cites Matthew 5:22 and explains that when it says don't call a brother fool, it's talking about judging by outward appearance. It's not talking about judging by the doctrine of Christ or the teaching of Jesus. And I'm just scanning the article. I think they were all the scriptural proofs in the virtue of name calling. And I'm just going to click stop, and we're going to stop with this. I'm just going to click